Welcome to Broad Eye, the podcast that explores knowledge gaps in ophthalmology and eye care.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Broad Eye podcast. I'm Dr. Bruno Fernandez, and today I have the pleasure of having Ariel Cao, President and CEO of Injectsense. How are you doing, Ariel? Good to have you here.
Very good. Thanks for having us today. Really glad that we can discuss this important topic.
No, indeed. And just to put things into context for our audience, you're developing a device that, of course, we're going to talk more about that. And just to explain how I'm particularly interested in having you on the show today. And I've done my resident ophthalmology maybe 20 years ago. And then I remember seeing those glaucoma patients, and then we measured their IOPs, which stands for intraocular pressure, twice a year, and then knowing how much those IOPs fluctuates by the minute, that's definitely not enough. So I really appreciate that finally we're gonna have something more high tech, to manage and follow up those patients.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think clearly you pointed out the scarcity of the information to support the basically the tracking or the therapy. This is kind of, in fact, the anomaly or that we have been kind of identifying almost a decade ago and try to address.
Cool. Okay, so before we talk about the things, let's talk about the people, behind the things, which are always more important. Let's talk about yourself, guide us through your journey. And then I've seen you've done a lot of things before starting Injectsense. So let us know you.
Yeah, so it's been a long journey. I'm originally from France, and basically it was clear for me in my 20s that a better place to be would be in Silicon Valley. So I started as a IC designer, got my way through different startup. As a side note, I started a company at 19 years old when I was in France. So I had already a pretty strong interest to start, an entity on a particular topic. And then that kind of gives me, I would say, a sense that a better place to do it would be obviously in Silicon Valley, although other places could allow that.
Mm-hmm. And sorry to interrupt, but IC stands for what exactly?
Integrated circuit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So not necessarily implantable devices. It's more.
No, it's basically IC. We'll also call that ASIC, which is application specific integrated circuit. Basically, it's anything that is dealing with electronics, like you have on your cell phone, on your cars, on your TVs. Those are basically semiconductor devices that are produced, by the billions, as you see today. So yeah, my background has been initially in circuit design, and I migrated slowly into the design, software design, where I found that designing circuit would be a lot more effective with design tools that automate some of the tasks that are quite complex or repetitive. And then I found my way into the design team of UltraSpark, which is one of the first 64-bit microprocessor with Sun Microsystem, which was a fantastic experience. And then gradually I found that sensors were kind of a domain that really was exploding. It was called MEMS. Microelectrical mechanical systems. So sensors start to really fall in the radar. And in 2000, I joined a company that we took public. And after a few years, I found out there was basically even further activity in the sensor domain that I will be able to to develop. And the more and more I had so many different projects that I understood where are the challenges, where are the solutions out there. It gave me, so many projects that I could better understand how to apply them to a particular solution. And in about 2008, we started to be exposed with several companies trying to address the intraocular pressure monitoring. Part of it was at Purdue University with Pedro Irazoki, who is right now at Johns Hopkins. So we start looking into this, but again, the solution were just basically too big, I would say too risky from a surgical point of view. And as you know, it's a key issue for device. So in about 2012, 13, about 3 years before starting Injectsense, and my father, by the way, was affected, my late father, because he passed away about 2 years ago. He had a severe case of glaucoma, and that started to really kind of trigger in my mind that there will be a better way to address glaucoma.
Yeah, and then it's so common for people to have this like very personal connection with the devices that or drugs that they want to develop. But how was it managed? Like, I mean, the glaucoma that your father had, like, did he eventually lost his vision?
Yeah, well, he lost his vision. He even lost the eye completely. The situation was pretty drastic for him, but the issue also was the drug was basically he was not tolerant for the drugs. He was, I mean, the whole disease management, the whole process was very painful for him. So I think when I saw this experience, it was clear to me that they were in the slippery slopes. Some of the cases that we know today are difficult to manage. We don't really understand some of the factors that create instability, that cause progression, and it's more than what we can, account today. In fact, when we discuss with KOL, we could see that yes, there is a picture perfect, 100% compliant patient, but that is maybe 30+% of the case may not be in that situation. So the first element that was kind of giving me a pause was the tonometry archaic method from the 50s, which was basically a roundabout way to measure pressure, but that's all we have.
Yeah, and like talking about compliance, right? Like, and even when patients are 100% compliant, like it doesn't mean that the drug is actually working for them, right? Because there's a huge variability of patients, how they will respond like to those drugs. And I mean, as we said in the beginning, like, I mean, you measure their IOP like twice a year. You had no idea, like, I mean, how that IOP is between visits, and then maybe like that patient's being over medicated, and then having to live with all the side effects of those drugs, or maybe worse,
especially
like
beta blocker.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the other extreme opposite, that patients are being under medicated, and then by luck, like, it happens that like during the visit their IOPs happen to be normal, and then like, I mean, the treatment regimen, it's not adapted to that particular case.
Absolutely, and I think to pinpoint what we keep hearing from my KOL, and as we have assembled a very tight, very closely coordinated group, and thanks to them for where we are today. But I think the key element is we do know we have, if I could use the term blind spot, in the monitoring, in particular in nocturnal phase, where if you lay down and basically you're in a situation, your blood pressure goes lower, you're going to have an elevation of IOP. So what's happening, people with hypertension, if they take drugs late during the day, that would be even worse for them because of the combination effect. So clearly what happened is, it's not like we don't have the tool to acquire data. We have sensor everywhere. But today we even have sensor on your tire, because they tell you that after a major situation with Firestone and Goodyear, I think it was Firestone and so on, they had to, the law has to just put a sensor into all the tire. Obviously the high is a bit more challenging in a way. So we basically say, well, how do we measure pressure? And really, when we look at tonometry, it was really kind of using this contact base or puff or whatever variation you imagine, it is also an equation that is sensitive to the cornea thickness, to many other aspects, to the calibration, to the user doing it. So it's full of factors that will affect the measurement. Even if you do it every 6 months, even if you do it every minute, you still don't have the most accurate measurement. But the way we were starting to think early on was a single data point doesn't give you a curve. And even if 6 months away. And because we knew that the circadian cycle, the period over 24 hours over and over again would be a more reliable indicator of the true effectiveness of the disease, the actual behavior of IOP in the region where maybe the drugs or the device is less effective. So as soon as we start, kind of asking what is the unmet need, we felt that, well, to understand how to manage a therapy, we need to know what is IOP. And we concluded that the current method doesn't give you an understanding of IOP.
Yeah. And there seems to be a trend on, like, it's a very fast growing market, like, of wearable devices that give us a bit more control of what's going on in our bodies, right? So there are many devices now that track blood pressure, like respiratory rate, and like oxygen levels, like sleep, and like glycemic, index, and
Glucose.
so on, glucose. So I guess Injectsense, it's right on their realm, and to give us, like, a more long term, I guess, like control of what's going on in our bodies. So is it the company focused exclusively on IOP, or the devices that you're developing have other uses as well?
Yeah, well, I think, to finish up on IOP and how the team, just give you about the people. So we co-founded the company with Enrique Malaret. And then we had a team. And I think the reason why I want to go before, going into other application shortly, the DNA of the company is 1/3 was previously part of Medtronic, and the 2/3 rest in Silicon Valley are mostly semiconductor design, MEMS, IC, you name it. So to be successful in the undertake that we have with Injectsense, we really start focusing on what is the mix of experience that we needed. And, if you have done cardiovascular, pacemaker, and you name it, which the experience is from the team in Minnesota, we can manage a PMA class 3 devices without any problems. We just have the process and the rigorousness to address it. And then we can blend the semiconductor, solution that we will apply to it. So going beyond that, because of this cardiovascular background, we decided to start with ophthalmology because we saw the sensor as very challenging as a complete system. But one of the biggest challenge is what we call deep implant. In the case of intraocular pressure, the sensor is basically a few millimeters in the posterior chamber. We can reach the sensor without too much problem for power and data. So that was for IOP. We also looked at very similar application, and another one is for neurosurgery. We have also starting to develop an application of a sensor for monitoring pressure and flow into a hydrocephalus shunt valve.
So at least for now, like, the device is being designed to be placed within the fluid.
It is a fluid sensor. Absolutely, it's a sensor that has to be exposed to fluid. It could be, aqueous humor. It can be a vitreous humor. It could be a cerebral fluid. It can be blood. In the context of blood, in that cases, we most likely will talk of a deep implant, like for monitoring PAP, which is looking at the cardiac efficiency of the heart. So we did not want to go directly on cardiac because of the challenge of blood exposure.
Yeah, just surgical like implantation, I guess also.
Yeah, it's basically another game, and
Yeah.
we felt that we needed a stepping stone to get before getting there.
Yeah, and then like glaucoma alone, it's a major undertaking. So I understand why, like, you know, it might be wise to take one step at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we do it because we are focused on a product. We are quote supply chain ready. Whatever innovation we are promoting, if we cannot develop, if we're not producing millions of units, then the viability of the solution is not as attractive. So from the get-go, we have been focusing our solution to be we've designed for manufacturing and designed for tests. For the specialists of the domain, that means that we can understand the failure mode of our product, and it's a key element for safety. If the product fails, it's a big issue for our patient.
Yeah. And I mean, talking about the approval process, I saw that the device was recently cleared by FDA, and I'm fairly familiar with the process for drugs, but not so much for devices. Okay. So drugs, they only get FDA approved after they've been tested in patients, and then with devices, it's the opposite, isn't it?
Well, first of all, to be accurate on where we are right now, we're not yet approved for market release. But we received, that's where sometimes there's a confusion. We received the Breakthrough Device Program designation, which allow us to have basically a preferred access and communication link with the FDA. We also received a research grant from the NIH or NEI, which is the SBIR grant, Small Business Innovation Research Grant, which was a bit less than $2 million. So those two accomplishments, which are no easy feast.
No, definitely not. Yeah. And congrats, by the way.
Thanks. We basically now we basically have validation of our solution. So it's not yet approved per se, and we will be in human next year. By the way, our pilot human study is targeted mid next year. We basically have the stamp of approval as a technology that would transform the way glaucoma is managed. That's kind of the conclusion of a breakthrough device designation. And now the key element that we want to also is to reinforce the partnership within the preclinical studies. And in the context of the NIH, we have also a subcontract with Johns Hopkins University, and specifically the Wilmer Eye Institute.
And which preclinical studies have been done or planned to be done? Is it in vitro or animals?
Oh, we already reached the live animal. We've done basically implant in rabbit. The goal of the initial animal study using rabbit was to validate that we can measure pressure within the range of a tonal pen. So the first was to really basically have a checkpoint: is the entire system working? And I'm glad to announce that it is. We basically connected an eyeball to the cloud.
And going a bit deeper on the technique or to implant the device and where that's going to end. So you mentioned already that's going to rest in the posterior chamber, and for our audience, like posterior chamber, it's like right behind the iris. So how does it get there? Is it a surgical procedure? Is it an injection? And how does it stay in place? Is it suturing?
Yeah, so the key element that we wanted to address is, as you know, when you go to the operating room, it's about $2,000 just to walk in there. So we wanted to make sure that the cost barrier was as low as possible to get into the implantation. But also, the first question, in fact, that was raised to some of our KOL was, how small the device has to be so that we can have the smallest incision that could be done in office. And basically what was indicated to us that we had to be at the mode gauge 19, which is about 1 millimeter. So 1 millimeter was kind of the width of the device that we were looking for. Later on, we realized that it could be a slightly larger, below 2 millimeter would be a self-healing incision. But what came about is a lot of people that we saw were going to the anterior chamber because that's where they think that the pressure is. I mean, that's what the reality is, where the pressure is due to an inflow-outflow imbalance. So what happened is a lot of research and a lot of innovation was done in the front of the eye, but maybe we were a bit contradictory to the traditional approach. We say, well, the problem is the pressure is seen by the optic nerve head. So our conclusion was, if we can measure the pressure on the posterior chamber, we will see the pressure seen by the optic nerve, which is the head, which is where the pressure is actually, causing a thinning of the layers that goes to the axon and then the connection to the RGCs. So going to the posterior chamber, suddenly discussing with Dr. Yanov and others, they say, well, there's a technique that we use almost, every day by the millions, is IVT, intravitreal injection for macular degeneration. So that was kind of a eureka moment to say, well, if we can mimic an IVT, we would be following in the footstep of a very safe and well understood procedure, except we don't do it every month. We do it once a year. Once for the lifetime of the patient. So that was the idea. What the pattern we have, in fact, we have blocking pattern in that domain, is using an injection of a sensor using an IVT method.
So the device stay in the vitreous?
So the device is anchored in the sclera. It goes through the conjunctiva, the tenon capsule, episcleral layers. Then we go all the way through the vitreous base, and the device is measuring away from the retina, and the lens safely is measuring the pressure in the vitreous.
And is it like, so it stays anchoring to the injection site?
To the sclera.
So it's not like free floating inside here.
No, you can't. Yeah, you have to be anchored, and it's a self-anchoring mechanism that is pretty well understood. The mechanism that we have also not only self-healing, but we shift the conjunctiva during the procedure. We shift the conjunctiva. We do the incision, and then once we release the device, the conjunctiva will be shifted from the head of the device, so you are minimizing the risk of conjunctiva. And
is it visible, like after it's inserted?
Yeah, we will see a little gray, kind of area. The device is about 1.7 millimeter width, 4.5 millimeter length, and 0.5 millimeter in thickness.
And you mentioned that the device stays there for life, and so it opens up a bunch of questions that I might have. The first one is that how do you charge it? Because I believe it needs like a bit of a battery or something to.
Yes, so that's one of the innovation that we have is we've been able to license a technology which has been developed for the last 15 years by CE Leti in France. It's a solid state battery, and this battery is within the stack, so it doesn't, it's not larger. It's not like you have a car battery on your eyeball. It's the device volume is 2.5 cubic millimeter, including the battery. So we're charging the device basically with the pair of glasses. You charge the battery it'll take about 5 minutes, because we only discharge for 1 week a quarter of the battery. So we oversize the battery, but we are lucky enough to have a very high, some of the highest energy density. And that way, we minimize the charge time, but the download of the data only take about 1 second.
So to charge it better, just put some eyeglasses on. It takes 5 minutes and the thing is charged. And you
exactly.
don't.
You do once a week. Yeah, once a week. Collect during the data collection. By the way, the key element also, because we thought that we didn't want to overburden the patient, like you see with eye care and other devices to do home monitoring. You have to intervene. The patient has to do something, stick something in his eyeball. That's never pleasant. That could be cause of injury. So we decided to take an autonomous approach, which is very important. In fact, that's something that the NIH and the FDA recognize as a key parameter to switch the paradigm. And the autonomous mode, to give you an idea, we are consuming an average of 20 nanowatt of power. So we're doing a design that is extremely low power, extremely efficient, and in the future, we may use also optical charging.
And you also mentioned also that the data needs to be downloaded, so it is not continuously synced. For example, like there's no app, for example, for the patient just to see like, oh, this is how much my IOP is right now.
You could. We by the way, a lot of the ophthalmologists will rather have less data with the patient because that may be confusing for him.
Yeah, because we know that we have an idea how much it fluctuates, but like we really don't, because like we never have a device like that, right? So we might come with a surprise there, like to see how much that thing fluctuates, and it might be scary for the patient.
Exactly. So I think what we're going to do, we believe that the communication replacement, especially with COVID, as people don't want to see an ophthalmologist for the risk of being infected. So our devices is really a poster child for telemedicine. But I think what is important is to reestablish a communication between the patient and also and the physician, but also give a sense of responsibility for taking the drops, for looking at the app, which will tell them if they are compliant. As you probably know, the majority of patients in glaucoma use a topical drug. Sometimes they use one, two, a combination of. So it's a challenge, if somebody is 80 years old and have to put the drops, it's difficult. So if you provide a guidance when the drops didn't reach the eye, so you don't have the effect you're looking for, if you wear the glasses, let's say you put them on, you keep them on, the monitoring can be continuous, but it can be accessible. The data can be accessible live by the patient, so you can stream the IOP data. Even if you put like an eye mask, like if you sleep, the person could be monitored remotely continuously, and the data will stream into an office, so the nurse can look at it real time. So yes, we are doing data storage, so monitoring, autonomously, but the device, if you have the wearable, can provide a continuous data chain from the sensor to the cloud and to a live session of monitoring IOP.
So basically, you have a device that can be implanted like in the office, that lasts a lifetime, can be charged in 5 minutes, and offers continuous IOP monitoring. Like that's a pretty cool elevator pitch.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we built over time. The battery has a 80 years lifetime because it's about several thousand cycles, and we do one cycle of partial discharge. The technology, by the way, a key element is our device is hermetic. We provide hermeticity so that isolate the electronic from the media, and it's truly hermetic that we tested it. It's very, very well established from we did accelerated lifetime testing, so we know the device will last 50 or more years. So the way we implemented, if the anchoring is solid, which we have evidence, the device really is dormant most of the time, and it's basically very efficient from an energy point of view, and the patient will not even know he has the device.
So in terms of timeline, you said like it's planned for spring next year to start
pilot,
being
yep, in
implanted
human.
in humans, and from that time on, like how long do you kind of estimate, obviously, like I mean that it will be like available for market?
Yeah, so currently we obviously we are now in the phase of preparing for basically GLP studies and going to an IDE. So before going to an IDE, we felt that we need obviously to do a preclinical GLP studies to make sure it's safe and effective. And we will do a pilot human study next year in Chile. And we have already all the protocol defined. Several KOL will travel with us. We are going to be very involved. In fact, for the first several thousand patients, we will follow it very closely, similar to what some cardiac company were doing. You follow the patient, you certify the injection, and then you have the safest context. So next year we're going to be in pilot in human. 2024 we will do an IDE submission, which allow us to start our clinical studies, and the process will take us into 2025 for market release.
And can the device detect anything other than IOP, like pH or like cytokines? I don't know.
Okay, so I mean, we could have other mode. The mode that I think has been a little bit interesting for us is basically we can turn the device into basically a oxygen sensor. So we can do oximetry in the eye. This is a little bit still under wrap, but that would be quite interesting if you see the saturation of oxygen crashing down. Maybe you have a sleep apnea situation. So this is one mode that we believe is, I mean, it's doable. The technology is in front of us. We have another domain. In fact, we recently filed some provisional patents, and I will not be able to go too deep into it, but we can turn our device into an active drainage device.
All right. Well, that all sounds very exciting, and also a lot of work ahead of you. So
yeah, no, that's good to know. I mean, this is not for the team, and this is not a job. This is a mission for us.
Yeah.
We see patient, and as I said, I got a personal experience that I don't wish to anybody to go through. And yeah, I think it's motivating. We have a tremendous. We're starting to, in fact, develop a patient advocate relationship. We want to connect, obviously, to care to ophthalmologists. We design it with them, for them. We also want to work closely with patients because they need the tool to help themselves to better manage their responsibility during the treatment of glaucoma. And in the longer term, we also believe that the company will have to have a philanthropic initiative where our devices, which is from a supply chain, it's a low cost of manufacturing per se. We should be able to reach out to African country and help them to address a disease that is very very devastating in Africa and other countries.
Yeah, and then knowing that compliance is directly related to economic status, like the need is just greater, right? Like in those countries that do not have such a ophthalmology network to supply them.
Yeah, exactly. There's no infrastructure. I mean, I had the pleasure to send my daughter to Tanzania. She experienced what's happening in the Maasai village and the infrastructure they have, but they all have a cell phone. So if you provide the device and a pair of glasses, they will be all being monitored, and the doctors anywhere will be able to to basically help them out. And as you probably know, there's a flying cataract surgery plane with Orbis.
Yeah, we had someone from Orbis, like Bradley, at our show, at our podcast,
exactly. So
like a few weeks ago.
Yeah, we will definitely find a way to implant the device in the, in this kind of setting. As I said, we were focused obviously on the US, Europe, but I think the platform we have, and we should be able to find a couple of other foundations to work with us and reach out to an African country and others.
Yeah, and I'm sure you will. The need is there, and if the device works, it's a no-brainer.
Exactly. So that's what we've done. I mean, it's been 8 years. It's a journey that we're not rushing through it. We're currently in a Series C of funding. We got, I think the people, the investor we see right now, they understand where we're going. And I think down the line, we will have all the resources to go even faster.
Perfect. Ariel, knowing how busy you are, want to be mindful of your time. I'd like to thank you again for sharing
thanks for the opportunity.
Everything you're doing. Any final words, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity, and we're working out to make that available as safely and with all the regulatory constraints. But I think the path ahead of us is very promising.
Yeah, no, it seems clear that your company is reaching a tipping point, and exciting things will come in the near future.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Good. Thank you, Ariel. Have a good one.
Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that concludes today's episode of the Broad Eye Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Of course, ratings and reviews are always welcome. And you can certainly share this episode with any of your colleagues or friends who might enjoy it. Thanks for listening.